I think the reason people are disillusioned with Starmer is because he ran on the coattails of Jeremy Corbyn. We're seeing a Labour government that's been heading more and more towards the right, both on the winter fuel payments, cutting benefits for the severely disabled, the demonisation of migrants, refusal to nationalise the water companies. I think we just need to be really clear that the same multi-millionaire and billionaire donors who are funding the Labour Party and funding the Conservatives are often the same people who are funding legacy media. I think we need bold leadership. I think the Green Party can lead on that bold leadership, and that's why I'm running to be the next leader of the Green Party.
Zack Polanski, welcome back to PoliticsJOE. For those who might not have seen you on our channel before, how would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'm Zack Polanski. I'm Deputy Leader of the Green Party of England and Wales. I'm an elected member of the London Assembly.
So we're here to talk about an announcement that you have. What is your announcement?
Yes, so put simply, the Labour government are absolutely failing. We can see that both at the national level and also in the local election results that are coming as we record this podcast. And the planet is burning, so this is a moment of real crisis, both in terms of the cost of living and the inequality crisis, and also the climate crisis too. I think we need bold leadership. I think the Green Party can lead on that bold leadership, and that's why I'm running to be the next leader of the Green Party. We are
going to get into that leadership campaign, what you're offering the Greens, why you think the Greens need new leadership. But first, we need to talk about the local elections. For full disclosure, our audience will be hearing this on Monday, but we are chatting about 1:30 on Friday, and the results are still coming in for the local elections. What is your reaction to what we're seeing so far?
I think my reaction is partly with the announcement that I just gave, that we're seeing the Greens do well, and I want to be really clear about that. We've made net gains in the last 7 elections. We're the only party to have done that, and it looks like it's going to be 8 in a row. Literally just before I came on air, Sahil got elected in Accrington. This was an amazing community campaign where you just saw them go from very kind of little grassroots to having this amazing win. We just won in Staffordshire for the first time, so I can give lots and lots of good stories. But also, it would be disingenuous to not talk about the elephant in the room, which is the fact that Reform are doing so well. Now, fundamentally, I think this is a total rejection of the two-party system, and ultimately we are in now 5-party politics. And I think a case can be made that if the Green Party just keep plugging away, we'll keep making gains, we'll keep growing, and people will keep joining us. So I'm confident we're in the right direction. What I think isn't happening, though, is we are not in the right direction fast enough. We should not be allowing Reform to occupy this space that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party had completely left vacant. And ultimately, I think a party that talks about bringing people's bills down, nationalising our public services, tackling inequality, taxing wealth, and tackling the climate crisis is an eco-populism that can really reach people. I think our party is doing that to an extent. But I think if we did it more, we'd be seeing a much better set of local election results right now.
I mean, part of the results we've seen has been the Runcorn by-election, where Reform beat Labour. But when I went up there to speak to voters before the by-election, it was interesting because lots of the constituents that I spoke to were really angry at Labour about policies like the winter fuel cut, not reversing the two-child benefit cap. Now they're very angry about the PIP cuts. Why do you think that Reform have been able to pick up these voters that want a change from Labour? What are they doing that's reaching these people that the Greens currently aren't?
So I think it's a few things. I think, first of all, I have no track with Reform in terms of Nigel Farage is a millionaire who pretends to speak up for working class populations, but actually is speaking up or serving billionaires. I think that's really clear. At the same time, we've really got to separate the Reform MPs and Nigel Farage's operation from people who might be thinking about voting Reform. Ultimately, those people are the people we have to show compassion and care for, because they're the exact people who have been disenfranchised by a two-party system that has failed them through successive governments. And also, things are really hard for people right now, and just when you see mainstream politicians from the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, from the two old parties, talking about politics, there just seems like an utter complacency and lack of what's going on out there. Now, what Nigel Farage, I'd say, is very good at is switching costumes. We saw this with steel nationalisation, for instance, a policy that makes complete sense. The Labour Party should have been talking about it a long time ago, and the Green Party have been talking about it for years, in fact. What I think we haven't done, though, is we haven't cut through. And I think that's sometimes because we're too technical with our policy and our detail. Now, I'm really proud that I come from a party that thinks a lot about the detail, that is very democratic, that has debates and is constantly evolving its policy. I don't want to change that at all. I think that's really at the heart of what our party is. What I think is also true, though, is when we communicate, far too often we are selling the recipe of the ingredients and not the final product. And I think what we need to do more and more of is explain how we're going to help people in their lives, how we're going to make sure that people have got food on the table, that they've got heating in their homes, and that they can get to work. And, you know, even if they're not working, they are also supported too. And I think Reform do this to an extent, but actually, as soon as they have any real scrutiny, you can see it fall apart quite quickly. And, since the general election, 95% of their donations have been from oil and gas giants and climate-denying companies. That's £2.3 million. I put it to their former head of comms last night on LBC, and he just kept outright denying it. And I just had a moment where I thought, well, I can talk about that it's there on the Electoral Commission, which it is, and it's plain to see. But how do you deal with a party that will just lie, that will just make up stories, and emotional stories at that? So I'm not making excuses, but I think for anyone on the left, we do have a harder job. We've both got to start from a place of truth and a place of fact, so there's credibility in what we're saying, and also tell a good, emotional, compelling story. All Farage has to do is the emotional, compelling story, which he does very well. It doesn't have to be based in truth. Rather than complain about or moan about it, though, we've just got to get better. We've got to raise our game. And by the way, when I say bold leadership, I don't just mean my own bold leadership and stepping forward. I'm talking about the bold leadership of communities all across the country, many of whom I've met during this local election, where I've been knocking on doors and at community halls, and people are crying out for the Green Party to seize this moment. We literally have a nature and climate crisis. We had racist riots on our streets just last year, and no one seems to really talk about that anymore. And inequality is growing ever deeper, and we've got Reform on the rise and the right wing on the rise. So it's very, very clear that there's never been a more important moment for the Green Party, and I'm absolutely convinced that with the whole party, with communities across the country, both in England and Wales, we can all come together and really create an electoral challenge to Reform. And I think the ultimate aim of the entire project is this. We need the Labour government to be more scared of losing votes and ultimately seats to the Green Party than they are to Reform. Right now, it's completely the opposite way around. So we're seeing a Labour government that's been heading more and more towards the right, both on the winter fuel payments, cutting benefits for the severely disabled, the demonisation of migrants, refusal to nationalise the water companies. And I think ultimately we need to make sure that our electoral project is so successful that even before we've started winning more MPs, the Labour government is already shifting.
You touched on so many interesting things there. The difference in resourcing between Reform and the Green Party, the challenges in messaging, and we'll touch more on that when we talk about your leadership campaign. But the leadership elections of the Greens will end in September 1st. That's when we'll find out who wins. Can you tell us why you are running?
I'm running for a lot of the reasons that I was just talking about, that I think this is a moment in British politics where we really need to take on both the failing Labour government, but also really offer a positive alternative to Reform. I think people can reject the division and hate that Nigel Farage offers, and I believe that a genuine positive politics of hope and community that is about tangible action in people's communities so they can really see the change is exactly the way forward here. That's not some abstract idea. I've got examples all around the country where Green councillors and councils are building council homes very proudly, making sure that we've got renewable energy, retrofitting homes to bring people's bills down. All of these things are really obvious, and they also can be done. We're living in a media landscape where very often things like action on the climate crisis is pitted against people's living standards. We know this just isn't true when communicated properly, and actually tackling the climate crisis and tackling the inequality crisis often contain the same solutions. What I think the party really needs is a bold communicator, someone who can cut through, and also who can create and grow a team. I think our MPs in Westminster have built a really solid foundation. I'm genuinely really proud of them. And I think sometimes we can try and replicate too much the other parties by focusing too much on our elected representatives in Parliament. And actually, the people I'm really interested to hear more from are our councillors all across the country, particularly in the north, where they're rarely represented in media, but also people who aren't councillors yet, who are candidates, or frankly, people who haven't even joined the Green Party yet. I'm really excited by people who might hear a message of positive and hope, go, actually, I don't need to reject politics. It is a space where I can make a difference. And we need to bring those people into the party, build power from the ground up, keep building those grassroots. And I think that's how we'll win our towns, that's how I think we'll win our cities, and that's how we'll win the country.
You mentioned the MPs in Westminster there. Two of them are, or one of them is Carla Denyer. Adrian Ramsey is also the co-leader. Why do you think they shouldn't continue as the leaders of the Green Party?
So I think there's loads that they've done really well, and I think it's really important to start there. Like during the TV debates, I think it's undoubtedly true that Carla Denyer really cut through. I think it was a moment just being online, just people being like, who is this? What's going on with the Green Party? Those moments where she took the fight to Angela Rayner, she took it to Nigel Farage, and I think it was a glimpse of what the party can be when we're being so clear about what we're communicating. Also, just last week, Carla on trans rights on Newsnight was really clear, bold, and I think really demonstrated the leadership that both the country needs and what our party needs. I think it's also true what I was just saying about when people are elected into Westminster and they're in Parliament, there's a whole job to do there to represent their constituents. And actually, there are lots of examples around the world with Green parties where actually the leader of a party is the movement builder. So they're the person doing exactly what I'm doing right now, which is traveling the country, nurturing talent, looking to develop talent, and ultimately get on the media and present our message in a way that is not entirely focused on Parliament. Of course, we want to win more MPs. That's the whole aim here. But actually, I think the Lib Dems are a good example here. They've won 72 MPs. Would I take 72 MPs right now? Sure, of course I would. But also, if you said to me, what are the Lib Dems changing right now? I think people would struggle to answer that question. There's a sense that they have run 72 different campaigns in those seats, and they've done those impressively well. So I'm not taking that away from the 72 individuals. But ultimately, there's no theory of change there. There's no clear narrative that the Lib Dems are saying that is ultimately talking about, corporations are destroying our environment, destroying our communities, and destroying our democracy. But they're not willing to take those on. They're not willing to take on multimillionaires and billionaires. I saw Daisy Cooper with Gary Stevenson, for instance. She shied away from even calling for a wealth tax. That seems like the most basic measure with how bad things are at the moment. Now, the reason why I'm saying all of that is I think if you focus just exclusively on winning MPs, as important as it is, without a bold, coherent narrative and build change in communities, then ultimately when you get to Parliament and you have those big group of MPs, you're not going to transform and create the change that you need. So what I want to do is a two-tier strategy, or a two kind of route strategy, which is, yes, to keep winning MPs. That's absolutely really important part of the strategy, to keep putting pressure on the Labour government to lean to the left rather than leaning towards reform, which they're doing very heavily right now. And also, just as crucially, to do that community organising, because I'm absolutely convinced if you live in a town, in the countryside or a city, inequality is hurting you. And very often people try and present stories about the Green Party that were split between our rural areas and our urban areas. And I know from this election that just absolutely is not true. When you talk to those people in the area, the context of the conversation is definitely different. We're talking about possibly farms and rural bus services, whereas in the city, we're probably more talking about rent controls and maybe police reform. So the conversations are different. But ultimately, what we are talking about is the 99% versus the 1%. We're talking about a very small group of people, a tiny small group of people who hold wealth and power in this country, who are restricting that from being redistributed. And I believe economics, just like wealth, should be rebalanced and redistributed amongst everyone.
I mean, a lot of people that would have once been traditional Labour voters maybe feel like they have been a bit left behind by this Labour government. Like you mentioned, they have moved towards the right on a lot of issues. The Green Party, I think, are the only party to formally endorse a wealth tax. Is your vision for the Green Party to become the party of the economic left?
I think there's a huge moment here. I would argue almost we already are the party of the economic left, and I think we need to be bolder about that. So that's a good example. And so this isn't kind of even about reinventing the party in some ways. It's about communicating what the heart of the party is. For me, the heart of the party has always been about environmental, social, racial, and economic justice. I say almost any rally that I go to, if there's new people there that I don't know, I always talk about how people know the Green Party are really strong on the environment. We want to protect trees, clean up our rivers. People know all of that. What I don't think they know necessarily is our policies are making sure that workers have proper rights, that they have a proper living wage, are treated with dignity, and they can organise in the workplace. I don't think they necessarily know our policies on rent controls or building social or council houses. I don't think they know our policies on media reform. So I think there's a whole suite of policies that are outside the environmental issue. As important as that is and always will be important, they are totally interconnected with all of these things. And I think we can be clearer about communicating that. I think the second part comes out of a mild frustration, and I mean frustration in a positive way. I meet people all the time, and these people will know who they are because some of them have public profiles, who are now endorsing the Green Party, and that's amazing, and I'm going to take that, so I don't want to sound ungrateful. But it's always, we need the Green Party, and we need a party like an independent party of the left. And I go, well, the Green Party has a fully democratic mandate. It is one member, one vote. If there are policies that people don't like about our party, as long as they align with our values, they should join the party and help us change those policies. There are policies I would like to change or I would like to see changed. And I think that's part of not expecting a perfect party to come along, but actually to go, does that party align with my values? Are the leadership speaking in a way that speaks to me and that I care about? And am I willing to get involved? Not just to join, just to pay membership fees, but actually join and really go, this is a project that needs to build a grassroots project where we really build power so we can challenge excess wealth in this country and excess power in this country. And I really believe the Green Party can be the heart of that. Now, I think the difficulty is if you start endorsing independence, for instance, is you are implicitly agreeing with the idea that the Green Party is some kind of white, middle-class, educated party, and the independent parties are where the working-class kind of radical politics is. That's absolutely not true. We have councillors all across the country who are working class from global majority backgrounds, and absolutely their politics is rooted in a politics that is to the, of the left. And so what I think I need to do, or I will continue to do, is rather than telling people they're wrong and they shouldn't be looking for alternatives, is make sure the Green Party is positioned in such a bold way that it then feels silly to be looking for anything else, because it is just so bloody obvious that the Green Party is your home. And I don't think, again, this is abstract. I've seen it happen. Just this week in Lambeth, we won an election in Lambeth last night. 2 weeks ago in Tottenham, David Lammy's constituency, we won an election with 55% of the vote. So we clearly can win in Labour strongholds. There are 120 people out on election day, on the action day. I won't name who some of those people are, because I don't know if they want to publicly know who they are, but I would say there are very much people of the left. There are very much people who would agree with this entire political project, and there are people who are saying over and over again to me, the Green Party is so close, but you're not quite there. What I want to do is be leader of the Green Party and take us right there.
We've spoken a lot about messaging, and one of the things that you're very keen to do is you want the Greens to take the fight to Reform. One of the things that Reform do is they kind of refuse to engage with the traditional rules of the Westminster game. That's a very populist tactic, but it's also been a very successful tactic for them, especially when it comes to their communications and getting their message out there. Do you think there's any lessons that you can learn from how Reform communicate?
Undoubtedly. I think there are loads and loads of lessons. Now, let me caveat all of that very, very carefully with, we will never cede ground to the right. We will never accept transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, racism. So clearly the content of the message couldn't be further away than where the Green Party is right now and where we are going to be going to. That all being said, though, I think this idea of breaking the rules, I think, is really interesting. I think the frame of, I think there's some rules that need to be stuck to. I was pretty appalled last night. I don't think this will necessarily break public consciousness much. But before Reform won Runcorn and Helsby officially, Nigel Farage was already out there tweeting that they'd won it before there was a recount. That is democratically totally unacceptable. Now, I realise as I'm saying this, the danger is that that's nuanced, and people will quickly go, you're such a square, like they'd won it and they did win it, so why does it matter? But I think basic standards and fundamentals around democracy have to matter, and we can look to America to that to see what happens. And we are on the route to that if we continue to allow Nigel Farage and Reform to keep dictating the rules of play. That being said, I think Ash Sarkar probably puts this well. I'm a vegan, so I don't like this metaphor at all, but I'm still going to use it. She says Nigel Farage is a shark, and it sometimes feels like the Green Party are vegetarians. Now, I've just said I'm a vegan, so I accept that she's probably guilty as charged. But I think as vegans, or more generally lots of people in the party who aren't vegan and lots of people who drive and all that stuff, you don't have to be green pure to be in the party. But the point is, we are ready to take on Reform. I am ready to go toe-to-toe with any Reform councillor, any Reform MP. In fact, I was meant to be debating Richard Tice at Glastonbury this summer. Richard Tice has pulled out. Now, I can't prove that's because, he's got chicken, but I think it's interesting that he's pulled out. I think we have to be ready to take it to people. I think we have to be ready to be on the front foot, to be really clear about what we want. And by the way, that is not ego. When I'm talking and using that voice or this microphone, or any Green Party person is, we're not talking for ourselves or for the Green Party. We're talking about the millions of people around this country who badly need that representation that I'm speaking with rather than for. I know because I've been in their community halls. I've heard the anger. I've seen the anger. I often think during this campaign, I was up north and I met a family where they couldn't afford to buy curtains for their youngest child. So they were just kind of had jumpers holding up in the window. Not the most egregious thing when people are going hungry and starving, but it was just a real kind of tangible example of these things are going on every single day in our homes, and they are very rarely talked about on media or in national conversation. Child poverty is talked about something as abstract and just about numbers, but actually we should get angry about child poverty, and anger is something that I think is often missing in politics. I think there's a balance. I think if you're just angry and you're not offering solutions, you're creating more toxicity and division. But I absolutely feel angry, but I also feel hope, because there are solutions. We know what those solutions are. We just need to get better at communicating them. So I think breaking the rules is about finding the anger and speaking the truth, and actually just not being polite about it, being kind but not polite.
I mean, if you could speak to people that are disillusioned with this Starmer government, have probably never considered voting Green because maybe they didn't feel like it was a place they belonged or a place that represented them, what is your pitch to them?
I don't think they've left the Labour Party. I think the Labour Party has left them. And I think the Green Party can absolutely be their new home. I think an example, and it links to the last question about messaging, is I was on LBC last year with the editor or political editor of the Daily Telegraph. She called the Palestinian marches hate marches. I said that was a racist thing to say. She said, oh, next you'll call me a bigot. I said, I will call you out if you say bigoted things. And the host said that I needed to apologise because I'd just called his guest racist and bigoted. He then tweeted out afterwards to say that that was the closest he's ever been to evicting someone from the studio. So whilst I absolutely want to be bold and will be bold, I think we also need to be realistic that with the mainstream media, we live in a space where actually if you do say something that cuts through or you do say something that challenges wealth and power, they will also hit back. I'm absolutely ready to be hit back on. I've already had experiences of that. And I think we just need to be really clear that the same multimillionaire and billionaire donors who are funding the Labour Party and funding the Conservatives are often the same people who are funding legacy media. And I think we need to be really clear about that story and also be really clear about the need for Leveson too, and to have proper media reform so politicians are scrutinised. I love being scrutinised. I'm totally up for being scrutinised, but also that there isn't such a bias in the conversation that you can't speak the truth or someone is more offended by the calling out of racism than the racism itself. Now, the reason why I say all of this is because I think the reason people are disillusioned with Starmer is because he ran on the coattails of Jeremy Corbyn. He ran on a very clear populist message that very often the story is that Jeremy Corbyn failed. But actually, Jeremy Corbyn got 3 million more votes than Keir Starmer did. Now, did he fail to win the election? Absolutely, that is undeniably true. So I don't think it's a strategy that is worth replicating in terms of they didn't get the electoral strategy right. But I think what is undoubtedly true is a politics of care, a politics of compassion, a politics that talks about the working class, not because we're just obsessed with this phrase working class, but actually because that's the vast majority of people in this country. And it's absolutely wild that they are not being represented by any political party other than the Green Party. And so I think there's a huge job for the Green Party to do to reach out to those working class communities and say the Labour Party is no longer the party of Labour. They are no longer the party of working class. They obsess about the phrase working people. They're not even representing working people, they're representing the bosses. And even if you are a working person or not working, they want to shove people who aren't working under the bus too. So the Labour Party, I think, have completely abandoned any call they have to decency or humanity. And the biggest thing I would say to them is, I know some people might go, I get all of this, but I've been in the Labour Party a long time, we just need to get rid of Starmer. They changed the rules for leadership elections. So even when Keir Starmer was elected, Clive Lewis, someone I massively admire, and let me be straight, he would be welcome in the Green Party any day. I mean, I can literally get a red carpet and roll it out to him. It's not my job for who'd affects that is done by a process, but I would love to see Clive Lewis, along with Zara Sultana, in the Green Party. But Clive Lewis, someone who is on the left of the party, put himself up for leader. He didn't even make it on the ballot because of the amount of MPs, Labour MPs, you need to sign your nomination to get on the ballot. Since that election, we've had a huge influx of right-wing Labour MPs. The party has taken a huge step to the right. When we have the next leadership contest in the Labour Party, it is going to be a Wes Streeting or an Yvette Cooper. It's going to be someone who has stood and cheered on cuts to disabled people, cuts to welfare, carried on arming Israel while there's a genocide going on, seen what's been happening around LGBT rights and particularly to trans people, and not taken a stand. They are not the person who can lead a movement that has any decency, compassion or care. And I think if people want to change, it is time to join the Green Party.
Zack Polanski, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thanks for having me.